Hello guys, how are you doing? So I hope that in the previous lesson which we had, that's about metacognition, I hope that you have discovered yourselves what is it that you undergo whenever you need to actually think about thinking. Okay, so you might have also realized that when you were still in high school, or even earlier than that, perhaps in grade 5 or grade 6, you already had actually been doing instances, all right, or even activities that are metacognition by nature. Let's say, for example, back then, you might have strategized yourself that in order for you to recall concepts ready for examinations, you were actually framing in your mind a technique so that you could easily recall whatever that concept is. One of which is mnemonic, okay? So this is actually like assigning letters to represent various concepts. Okay, let's say for example, for the word star, okay? So you would want to link S with a concept that represents or that starts with S, and then T with another, A with another, and then R with another, respectively, so that in the event that you need to already recall the concept, it's easy, okay? Because you already have the mnemonic. That device will actually help you to recall just easily and just naturally what the concept is required of you at the moment you're taking the exam, or for whatever purpose is for that matter, okay? And other strategies would be like you may want to associate, all right, a previous concept, okay, to an existing concept that you have just known today. So sometimes we tend to react, okay, to new and existing knowledge like this. It's kind of, I've already encountered this in the past. This is like synonymous with this, blah blah blah. All right, so we tend to have a link, okay, of some concepts we have already learned in the past as stored in our, how do you call this, in our memory, and then we try to call them and then connect, okay, to this present encounter with the knowledge on hand, okay. And that's another strategy. So para bang when you already are involved with an examination or with a recalling instance for that matter, you may just recall, okay, or you may just have to remember what the previous one means to reconnect it with this present, okay, knowledge required of you. And others would do it this way, which personally worked for me, other than the mnemonic device, no? We have different styles, okay? And another metacognition or metacognitive process and strategy that worked for me when I was still a student, or even when I have to do things, all right, that requires a great deal of memory, that would be to associate, all right, a concept with an object, okay? I would often even go to a place, to a comfortable place inside our, I mean outside our home back then, and then I would associate a flower, okay, which has like 5 petals into 5 concepts. The petals, each of which actually represents one thing in mind, another in mind, until all the 5 would fill those petals, let's say in a clockwise or in a counterclockwise position, okay? So that's a metacognitive strategy, okay? And I know that you guys have you know, a lot of strategies that you have discovered yourselves, or that actually work for you, okay? And that's okay. We vary, but definitely for whatever works in you, that's actually a metacognitive process, okay? So yeah, I think that's a recap, and enough of a recap to just remind you about metacognition and the different strategies, all right, and the different types of knowledge that actually were discussed in the previous video lecture, okay? And now we are moving into another lesson. And this is actually under Unit 3 already, which concerns the teachers and learners' roles in classroom management. Well, ideally, we might think that the classroom management is solely manned, okay, by teachers. Well, because whose duty is it to oversee or to look after the structures, the how do you call this, the outlook, the resources that should be in the classroom? Well, obviously, you will answer me, it's the teacher's role, it's the teacher's concern. However, classroom management does not only look into the physical structure per se, but classroom management actually entails looking into atmosphere, all right, like behavior that happens inside it. And an equally important person, okay, who has a share, okay, on the management of this is definitely a learner. And that includes you, okay? So you learners have to partake, okay, your role together with the teacher in order to come up with a classroom environment or with the classroom that is managed accordingly, okay? Because classroom management also involves freedom, responsibility, and the only way that we feel the freedom, okay, in the classroom is if we have shared responsibilities. And usually, if you may to recall, okay, if you may to get back, how do you call this, on those first meetings with your teachers, you might remember that during that time they would also ask, how do you want the seating arrangements to be? Would you like it in alphabetical arrangement? Do you want to sit with a peer or with a friend, or do you want to just sit anywhere around whenever you come to class? Things like that, all right? So there are actually stuff or even conditionings that happen as early as the start of the classes that later on translate to how classroom is being managed. Traditionally, of course, it's entirely different because it's all the teacher's concern, it's all the teacher's decision. However, as we have shifted, right, to a learner-centered structure, then definitely your roles are encouraged and should be at work in classroom management. All right? So let's get into the deal. Firstly, we'll look into the teacher's roles and responsibilities. Okay? So the key figure in the classroom is definitely the teacher, right? The key figure. And this teacher actually has responsibilities. Not just responsibilities that are simple, but actually are great and, sometimes too immense to measure. And they actually do not just fulfill, okay, the act of teaching, but these people, these teachers actually have to maintain as well the classroom as an orderly and a safe place to study, okay? If we look into what VJ, together with other authors in 2016, have posited, right, they actually summarize thematically the roles and responsibilities of teachers. We're going to look into that as we move into my presentation. However, I'd like you to look into what the first statement has just said, okay, that it's not just merely the delivery of instruction. It's not just, how do you call this, primarily, okay? It's not primarily only to transfer knowledge, okay, to young minds or to learners, but definitely an equally important role that teachers have to look into as a primary or as a major concern is also the classroom, okay? Because if I were to bring you back at your homes, okay, before you even go to your schools or to your classes, or especially now that the travel restrictions or even the pandemic has limited you to get out of your homes and to go to your schools, well, you might have realized that even at your homes, even if you are already at a comfortable place, you still look into a specific place inside your home that really ensures you are safe, you are organized, you are systematic, you are free of disturbances, you are free of other concerns. So it's short of saying that you want a nook, you want a space to freely and to actually actively learn. Okay, same is true in the classroom. The reason why teachers have to look into the order and the safety, all right, of the classroom is so that learners would have that feel, all right, of interest to engage and to even be present every meeting and to get involved in classroom instruction. Okay, so that is the deal. Teachers really are bombarded with so many concerns to look after. It's not just, it's, well, unlikely with other countries, this should be the role of another person already. They have what they call teacher assistants, okay, which in a third world country like ours, we do not have that kind. Well, unfortunately, that's the real deal in the Philippines. But for our case, we have no other choice but to actually maintain an equal footing when it comes to being an instructor or a delivery of instruction. I mean, a deliverer rather of instruction. And then as someone who housekeeps, all right, the classroom. Okay, so that is the teacher generally inside the classroom. Now let's look into the thematical how do you call this, summary, or the thematic summary of roles and responsibilities of teachers according to VJ and others. Okay, first point under teacher behaviors. How does it matter? How, like, let's say for example, if you behave accordingly, how does that matter to the learners? If you behave outside or contrary to what you profess in the class, how does that matter? Does that in any way affect you? Let's say for example, your teacher was actually just talking about ethical standards when it comes to relationship with learners, and it's actually off the legal boundary if you are the teacher and then on that same semester, on that same academic year, you had a relationship with one of your learners. How does that matter to you? When you just actually learn that it's unlawful and it's a no-no, it could be a ground for, a case that can be sued against you as a teacher. If you were that learner, how would you react? How would you look into that teacher? How will you be affected? All right, so these are a few of the questions we have to see in here. You see, teacher behavior can actually affect, all right, a lot of different situations, including the classroom environment, the way learners respond to you, and the overall behavior management within your classroom. Look at that. It's not only about the classroom environment. It's not just about the management. But you see, sometimes if we get surprised why some learners would be so disrespectful or would be so blunt when it comes to their way of dealing with us, then that might be a point of question that we have to reflect upon as teachers. It must how do you call this, push us to that moment in time when we have to ask ourselves, what have I shown the learner? How have I dealt with matters in the classroom? Why is this learner actually reacting differently towards me? Or why is it that the behavior is seemingly disrespectful? All right, so these are things to consider. And this actually has a relationship with the teacher's behavior, whether unconscious or conscious, can actually affect the learner's behavior. Look at that. Whether you are intentional with what you are showing to your learners, whether you are exemplifying or modeling, okay, a virtue that you believe, or that you, yeah, that you deem is for their benefit, okay, if unconsciously you mix it up with the inconsistencies, all right, unconsciously, then the learners might as well also not behave accordingly, because there's a point of question. That's why this must be sounding a cliche. You have to walk the talk. Whatever you profess in the class, you really actually have to live by it, okay? It's not just about preaching and preaching and preaching, but you have to live by what you preach or what you teach in the class. So that if you want to yield or to obtain a learner behavior that is positive, that is, how do you call this, encouraging, or that is accordingly, then that must be how you deal with it. All right, so that's according to Levine and Nolan 2010. So what does that imply? Well, that's imperative to say that we teachers have to be very careful, okay, especially with our intentions, those that are intentionally made actions in our class, or whatever we show or speak in class intentionally. We have to filter them ahead of time before we even cast them or blob them in class. Or if it's unconscious, sometimes if there's a need to correct, okay, let's say for example, you acted so differently or so angrily about something without you noticing that there are actually learners around you. How can you do about that? You cannot just leave it like that. You can be apologetic, that's okay. It won't make you less of a teacher, but you can actually explain like, this rose up because my emotions just, just flared up, and I was very, how do you call this, consumed right at that moment. But my behavior should not be copied in any way, and you should not remember the bad things that you have seen. Things like that. To be sorry as teachers won't actually, how do you call this, pull back our license. Okay, it's okay. We are humans. We also commit mistakes. Sometimes we also misbehave improperly. But to leave it hanging and to leave it a point of question for our learners will actually multiply the error. Okay, so as early on, we have to make that effort of correcting our behaviors or of filtering them in when learners witness them. Okay, so look at this. Within this scheme, okay, that scheme of Levine and Nolan about the conscious and unconscious act, okay, of behaving that actually affect learners' behavior. Within these is actually, or are actually, management styles that teachers may use within their classrooms, teacher-learner relationships, and labeling. Okay, look at that. So in this manner, therefore, if you are able to filter the kind of behavior that you show to your students or even before your class, then you also have a way of looking into what type of management styles would actually work for you and your learners. And then later on, eventually, you would see, okay, a trend, okay? You can actually trace a trend which you will, how do you call this, consider, okay, as a manner of establishing relationship with your learners. A relationship that's, of course, not so friendly, not so informal, not so unprofessional, but of course a relationship that still binds respect between you two. Okay? And then let us also be very conscious, very, how do you call this, considerate about this. Whether we like it or not, our behaviors, all right, would sometimes unconsciously leave labels to our learners. That's the reason why if you were to ask your learners later on, let's say at the end perhaps of a school year, and you want a feedback from them, you'll just get surprised that they have actually named you, all right, with labels, or they would remember you with labels. Let's say, for example, I myself have had a lot of experiences when graduates of the courses I have been handling with them would come back to me with messages and say, "Ma'am, I would remember how you would call our classmates whenever we could hardly answer your question. You would always say you are guessing, agganganga, or like your jaws are dropping just because you couldn't actually tell it correctly. I mean, what I am expecting, things like that." And others would also label you as their teacher with something that you act, okay, as a mannerism, okay. And everyone else has this. We all have mannerisms, and these are unconscious behavior that we tend to show our students and would sometimes leave a print or a label to them, okay, to remember us. Okay, but that's okay. That's how actually it is going. And no matter what the labels are, be sure, of course, make that conscious effort to make it sure that somehow there's no bad label. Okay, it's okay. Those labels sometimes are humorous and have that goal of actually challenging their minds. Let's say, for example, I was not offended when they reminded me about how I address them in class. Okay, because to me and to my intention, I was actually just challenging their higher order thinking skills. That's why I would often say, "Hi, aganganga ka mo." All right. I don't know how that is translated in Ilocano or in any other term, but it's like it kind of looks like this. When you're asked questions and then you appear like this in class, you tend to be in a very deep thought, and then you actually could not just grab or grasp the right words to answer the question. No matter how many modifications have been done, simplification of the question, still I could not elicit responses that would best fit the question. That's why I would usually end, "Aganganga ka mo." Okay, you are guessing. Things like that, all right? Okay, we move on to the second point, and that is the teacher is actually an integral figure in the overall running, all right, and management of the classroom. If a teacher is not fully engaged and excited about what they are teaching, look at this, here is the consequence. Then the children will pick up on this. Okay, be careful. They will actually pick up on that vibe. And they as well, all right, here is the great consequence, all right, the harm that's actually causing it. And they as well will not be engaged to learn as much as they could be. Okay, look at that. You see how challenging it is to become a teacher. Even the way we how do you call this, present ourselves before the classroom, our rapport, our stature at that moment, even our vibe, our conviction would actually influence them. And if they actually have a catch of this vibe na you're not ready, you don't know what you're saying in class, you seem to be like making up words just to, how do you call this, just to get through the time of your discussion or your meeting with them. And if they have a catch of this, if they would feel this and would receive the vibe, then definitely you will see it working in class, that they as well will not also show the same interest and would be like filled with a lot of questions and even question your credibility. And that's the most how do you call this, the most serious issue that you could possibly face or handle as a teacher. It's really a shame, all right, on your part if this is what you get from learners' response when you initially actually show in the classroom that you are not fully engaged and you do not have that proper zeal and knowledge about your subject. Okay? So please lang, when we become teachers, let us make sure that even if there are, problems or perhaps challenges that are hitting us personally, we should how do you call this, put it in the back seat, all right, and then leave that back seat meantime, and then go to your class, appear as if there is nothing that's bothering you, and then act, okay, accordingly. That's the reason why it's really a challenge to become a teacher. Sometimes you really have to make that wise decision of faking things up, not necessarily faking things up, but showing them that you are strong, because they actually model from you and you're a very critical person in their learning. All right. And so what does that say? According to Wong and Wong 2009, an effective teacher often becomes a professional leader who thinks, reflects, and implements. That is what I was saying. No matter what circumstance you're facing personally, you have to actually be professional and live your personal life meantime to deal with the job or with the call of duty that you are asked to accomplish. And that entails thinking, reflecting, and implementation. Because if you do not think about that, then you might as well carry the load and then eventually affect everybody in the class. Would you just imagine the number of lives that you have discouraged, that you have actually demotivated just because of not reflecting upon your personal issues in life? All right? And now we move on to the teacher's management style. So that's behavior. Now it's on the management style. This would mean, how do you call this? How you strategize already. This is true to your own choice. It does not apply to all teachers. They are not common. They do not have singular method or style. All right? So many teachers have different management styles. Look at that. So sometimes they'd prefer to use it on a day-to-day basis. Levine and Nolan again in 2010, all right, suggest that there are many different strategies, all right, when it comes to teaching and management styles that teachers can use to promote good classroom management. While we may have been used, okay, sometimes we may have been, how do you call this? Habitual when it comes to our practices or styles in the classroom. But we can actually change that or sometimes modify that, because there are actually existing strategies we could look into as teachers. And we may also consider doing or choosing that. Okay, so we look into point number 2 under teacher's management style. You see, the purpose of the learner-directed approach is to build and create a community of learners in which they work productively together and care for one another. All right, so that is the picture. If the classroom and the teacher has this management style of making learners directed, all right, towards their own learning, then what is encouraged here is group work and collaboration among themselves, among the learners. Okay, and that's actually a learner-directed approach. This would mean that in collaborative classroom, all right, the learning process is jointly done with learner and a teacher. Generally, of course, the people who are the prime movers, okay, in a collaborative classroom are the learners themselves, but definitely with the guide of a teacher. Okay, so that's a teacher's management style. Another would be within a teacher-directed management style. All right, on the other hand, this is already a teacher-directed one. The teacher will have sole responsibility of what is going on in the classroom and how the children are learning and behaving. Okay, so this is in contrary with point number 2. All right, and this now tells us that the authority in the classroom is the teacher, and from whoever, it is from here or from him or from her where the knowledge and decisions would come from. All right, so the dispenser, all right, of information and even of decisions in the classroom is the teacher. Okay, so all of these decisions, responsibilities, what has to be done, what should not be, are the concerns of a teacher. All right, so this strategy could be helpful for some learning environment in which it is teacher directed, and that is actually the need, of course. But if the learner has an environment, or if the classroom has an environment in which learners appreciate or get engaged better with the collaborations or with the brainstorming together with their classmates, then it should be a learner-directed approach that should be employed by the teacher. So that is the reason why, if we go back to what Levine and Nolan in 2010 just said earlier, then there must be varied choices that teachers can consider or should consider in order to fit best for the need of the classroom, particularly the learners. Okay? Well, teacher-directed management style would work for some, some nature of discussions or some nature of competencies, but not definitely all the time. Okay? Now, we'll look into letter B, and that's relationships affecting learner behavior. Okay, we'll see. This is point number 2. Okay, I mean a general point. The teacher-learner relationships that are present and made within the classroom can have a huge effect on the overall academic achievement and behavior management within a classroom. Okay, teachers who are proficient and effective are more capable of impacting lives of learners than teachers who are not proficient and effective. Okay, so that's according to Huang and Wang 2009. What they are trying to point here is that if the teacher is knowledgeable, if the teacher is effective, if the teacher, has a sound judgment or even sound management when it comes to the learnings that he or she shares in the classroom, then he or she is more looked up to, okay, by the learners. And these kinds of teachers would usually leave a mark of excellence and even inspiration or an impact to the lives of the learners. Okay, so that is the reason why we also have to check ourselves as teachers and as teachers to be. I must also say, as per observation, that the kind of generation today would definitely find fondness, okay, to teachers who are just too friendly, all right, even outside the border already of professionalism. And the thrill here is sometimes because of that over-friendly attachment or over-friendly engagement and relationship, I'm sorry to say this, what I'm about to say, respect is already underestimated, which I personally do not, okay, I really do not like that to happen. That's why as much as possible, I make sure, okay, that how I relate in the class during a formal session would be different when I relate to the learners outside of it. That's the reason why most, if not majority, of the classes I've handled since the start would tell me that I am too strict, I am too high with my standards. Well, that of course happens inside the classroom. But outside the classroom, I can actually befriend people. I can also speak their language, gay lingo, if that's what they call it, or even the friendly lingo that they would use. I could also do that. But definitely when it comes to the proficiency required of me as a teacher, that I have to look as a primary concern. All right, and whether the students will like me or not for that, if I know that I have actually given, all right, my best, or even the due, okay, the due learning and teaching that I have to deliver, all right, then that's okay. It doesn't really matter. Okay. Yeah. we look into relationships. Okay, again, further, relationships are created between learner and teacher in an effective classroom. So these relationships should be based on trust. Okay, you know, trust where the learner feels comfortable. Learners, especially at a young age, need role models, someone to look up to who may influence their lives. All right, it is highly important to make good connections with all your learners. You see this? You may not necessarily be so friendly. What matters is actually the trust that learners would feel about you and with you, and that makes them comfortable. You know, role modeling is a very important asset that teachers have to practice and live by in order to develop that sphere of influence in a learner and among learners. And this is one thing I really I'm not surprised, but sometimes would give me that fulfillment of doing the right thing and delivering according to my style, no matter what others would tell about me or no matter how others would judge me. You know, there are the smart ones usually would tell me this. I mean, yeah, those who are excelling or doing good in class are usually the ones from these comments are coming from. And they would tell, you are actually this teacher who is so strict, but would make us ordinary students dream, all right, of being or extraordinary as well, like you profess, and then like you encourage us and like you advise us of becoming. You always make sure that we give our best because we deserve to give our best for our own benefit. And whenever I read statements or comments unsolicited from my learners like that, I would get back to my why. All right, that drives me back to my why am I teaching, and that would eventually translate to my purpose. And I would say, okay, I must be doing what is due, and I must maintain that kind of style. Yeah, I admit I have such a standard in class, like you perhaps have had encountered earlier during our first meeting, and even when we are actually deciding on things already. If I say black, it's black. If I say white, it's white. But of course, some are negotiable. It depends on the instances, all right? But definitely when it comes to the trust I have to establish with you, and if that is the root, okay, of where you feel comfortable is, that you have to remember, okay? You go back to the first point as well on the proficiency and effectiveness that your teacher or that your instructor is actually just wanting to establish. All right, point number 3. So it says there that effective classroom management and positive relationships between you and your learners will produce a good environment for learners to learn. The language in which you use will further affect the relationships you have with your learners. Very critically, language is also a very, how do you call this? Indispensable or a very critical aspect of establishing good classroom environment and even effective or positive relationship with the learners. If I may bring you back to that line, there's this line it would say, your words will either break or make someone. Okay, yeah, that's it. That's why we have to be very careful. As teachers, we have to filter, right, the choice of words and even the language that we make use of in the classroom, because this is critical in establishing relationship and effective classroom management inside the classroom. Okay, let's filter. Let's look into what might look appealing and building up their confidence and even their how do you call this, their motivation to get engaged or to stand up and recite even if they do not have clear answers in their mind. All right, you can actually show how do you call this, strategies or approaches to do this. You may say it's okay, you can always share your ideas, you will not be branded wrong or how do you call this, or sinful if you might have shared an off-point answer. You just have to assure them that it's okay to try. Okay, so things like that. You may also how do you call this, be very giving when it comes to appreciation, to commendation, okay, or to affirmation when they do things right or when they say things just correctly as you have expected. So these are some of the gauge in which we could see how our language is at work in the classroom. Okay, what you may charge me for my label, which is aganganga, things like that. Well, this is not really offensive because whenever I say it, I would smile. I would show them a little grinning in my face. And then eventually, okay, let's put the question like this. And still, if they do not understand, hi. Oh, that's the time already that when I would say, you guys are guessing. Okay? So that's actually not an off-the-limit language, but it's more of a challenge. Okay? And here is letter C, that's labeling, all right? So learners within any classroom are unique individuals and therefore they respond in different ways, because they're unique. So the positive relationships that you are hoping for may need some extra work with some learners, especially those with special needs or those with trust issues. Okay, very importantly, we don't expect, okay, every learner to be responding equally good or equally excellent. All right, no, that will never ever happen. They will always be some members of your class who you could hardly connect with, and there are also some who you could actually hardly explain, all right, the concepts to. And what does this require to a teacher? Definitely, this requires the teacher to become more emphatic, more understanding, more welcoming, and more patient. Okay, so that the positive relationship that you're hoping for may actually be established. And that requires extra effort, extra passion, and extra dedication. Okay, so learners who feel, all right, I will go back to this first. Interacting well with all learners is important if you want your class to be well managed. That's right. So once you have already sorted out who in the class are needing extra attention from who are actually just coping so easily with what you are discussing or what you are telling, then you already have this strategy. You come up with a strategy of equally, all right, dealing or interacting with all of them. So that means to say, just because you have already identified the groups that are already excelling, that you always call after them, all right? And you would say, si ganito lang ang marunong. She's the only one who often recites. She's the only one, or he's the only one who often gives the correct answer. And then the rest of you, you are nuts. No, that should be a no-no. No negative labeling. That also goes back to the language. What you do is like this. Okay, that's good. I have been hearing from you. What about from like this? Okay, you call from someone with a special need or perhaps someone with a very low self-esteem. You try to build up on that learner and let him or her feel that it's okay, that she or he should not fear the classroom because what he is telling will not actually be feasted upon and she or he will not be mocked, all right, by anyone in the class if he or she has to speak. Something like that, all right? So learners who feel liked, all right, by their teachers reportedly have higher academic achievement and more productive classroom behavior than learners who feel that their teachers hold them in low regard. That's according to Burden in 2006. Look at that. Sometimes we also have this unconscious, all right, feeling, okay? We may not be intentional about it. Hindi natin sinasadya. But sometimes learners would just feel intimidated or sometimes would feel afraid, all right, about us. And well, it happened to me early this semester when someone was speaking on behalf of the class saying that they could not message me personally because they are afraid of me. And you know, I didn't feel accountable because earlier I have already spoken and how do you call this, specified on my rules in the class. And what I did was to call the attention of that learner, not to tolerate the learner to keep practicing that kind of, saving by grace his or her classmates. But definitely, I had to check on that learner so that he or she may also, the rest, okay, who are being represented may also feel that freedom to speak in class because I will actually entertain each of them so long as they reach me out correctly and accordingly. So that's it. All right. We have to let them feel that they are equally, entertained. They are equally heard, all right, and given attention to, in order that you will not be thrown the blame when it comes to their low performance in class. Okay. Definitely, it's not just the singular reason, okay, for low academic performance, but it may actually affect, all right? It may affect, all right? So it was also found out that learners who were labeled at risk performed better academically when these learners were taught as if they were gifted. This is very true. You know, to my surprise, there are learners, well, there have been most of my learners already now in the past who to me are actually just hiding in a shell. But I have this vibe towards them that they have actually gifts that need exposure. And so what I do is talk to that learner and say, have you ever tried doing like this? Did you ever have an experience on storytelling or on extemporaneous speaking, on essay writing, and stuff that I know they are capable of just by having gone through an output or something that they have shown in class. But I know I have this kind of feeling, the gut feeling that they have invested or God has invested something in them that just needs to be discovered. And sometimes the irony is these learners would not be recognized by teachers. They don't know them. But I really have that belief that they got to be just brought to a place or to an experience to speak to themselves or to tell it to themselves right there and then that they actually have got it. And by God's glory, these people have actually been doing very good since I have exposed them. And there's this one graduate of ours. She's now already employed as a teacher. Yeah, a permanent teacher right after just a year after graduation. But she has been employed to another agency after graduation. And she brought the university to, regional fits when it comes to her storytelling skill. And it just took a notice, okay? If you only remind this person that he or she is gifted, even if he or she has not been looked up or has not even been recognized by others or labeled at risk, dehado, hindi marunong, well, you could actually change a story and bring someone, okay, to his or her limelight. So this surprising study showed that the teacher had already labeled the learners to be at risk or underachievers. That's according to Hardin 2012. Okay? Well, this is a result from a study. And same is true with what I have shared earlier. I must say this study has actually yielded the correct responses from its respondents. And just recently, there was also Miss Lay Cassandra Flaviano, our representative, alright, from during the anniversary celebration of Cary campus. Well, I noticed, this is what your RVLs can do. Whenever I would browse and listen, right, or look at you, view you as you are sharing your reflections, I already have formations of labels, but definitely not really the meaning labels. I mean impressions about you. And then when I go to the second, third, and then eventually the fourth, I would already have fixed my mind and say, this learner's good, this learner has something, and I would put my trust already and belief to that learner. And that's how it happened with Miss Flaviano. I messaged her just a day before the competition, and I asked her whether he or she has actually got the experience already when it comes to public speaking, and she said nay, not even once. And she feels low with confidence when it comes to such endeavor. But I told her I could not grasp the verbatim or the exact statements I have told her, but as much as I could remember, I told her that you have sound ideas based on how you deliver your RVLs, and I also noticed that you are proficient with the language. Just you know, a little correction on some grammatical glitch, but you are good, and count this experience, okay, to make it better. So things like that, and eventually, you know, it's really fulfilling. Well, I don't own the credit because she actually has it. She listened to my suggestions, she listened to my coaching, whatever I have told her based also on my experience when I used to be in her shoes. I told them everything, even the rest, everything as per my experiences, which I brought until the nationals. And she, during the competition, I was one of the judges, okay, and I withdrew, okay, I withdrew being her coach because I did not want that integrity issue or the credibility issue when it comes to result. And surprisingly, she was not actually the first in my rank, but to the two other coaches, she was. And so there's no bias actually, but she was actually just very fine, very straight with her ideas, and she did well as I have expected, but she could actually do better. And same is true with anybody of you in this class. Yeah, there are also men or even gays I have noticed who are doing really well, and they are consistent with their quizzes, huh? I have noticed that you performing in your quizzes and then you equally performing best, also your best in your RVL. That's a good deal, okay? And yeah, that's actually what the third point is telling us. And now we are on the 53rd minutes of this video, but I am not yet done. I'm afraid there must be an information overload if I finish the entire slides. So we might as well just end it here, and then I'll continue in your next video lecture, okay, so that we would be able to accommodate your video lecture for this session, okay? I hope that you guys have learned something, and I hope that you now at least have a bite of what responsibilities you also have to carry along when it comes to your studies, okay? Because it's not always your teacher's role to feed your mind or to make you at ease when it comes to your learning, but you actually have an equal share, okay, of the pie, okay? So I hope to hear from you after this video lecture presentation. Thank you and goodbye.